Hi, Paul Ferranbi, aka IncrediPaul, and this is a little bit different episode of IncrediPaul Leadership. So I want to tell you about it. Launching a new podcast, hoping to produce a new podcast called Knowledge STEM, and I got to get interviewed by the host of that podcast, Imani Porter. So this episode is an interview from Imani Porter interviewing me about what I'm doing with Knowledge STEM, IncrediPaul Leadership, all things have to do with me. So it's kind of a different episode. I know a lot of different episodes I get to talk about myself, but you don't often have people get to interview me. So I'm super excited so you can learn a little bit more about me, what I'm about, what I'm passionate about, empowering young professionals in STEM and entrepreneurship become the most incredible versions of themselves. And then a little bit more about the nonprofit I lead, Knowledge STEM, National Alliance Lead Acceleration of STEM. Without further ado, just hit the intro and let's get into the episode.
Turn this up, turn this up.
Your professional development is one of the keys to your career success. When you combine your desire to grow with actionable steps, your journey to success becomes an incredible reality.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Knowledge STEM podcast. Thank you for joining me on this scientific journey. I am your host, Imani Porter, and my goal is to be your peer guide as we explore various STEM career paths open to us as early career scientists and engineers. For today's adventure, we will be accompanied by Paul Ferranbi, and he is the president of Knowledge STEM. So that is exciting, the president of the organization and the host of the IncrediPaul Leadership Podcast. So without further ado, I'll let you intro yourself, Paul.
Thank you, Imani. I am super excited to be on the show. Like you mentioned, president of Knowledge STEM, and Knowledge STEM has really been a passion of mine because our mission is to unite, support, and build community among all historically excluded peoples in STEM. So what does that mean? Our foundation is mentorship, but then we also do a lot of stuff with conferences and workshops, things like that. You also mentioned IncrediPaul Leadership. So that's the podcast I have, and IncrediPaul incorporates a lot of other things that people may or may not realize. So it has a podcast. I also do coaching. I'd like to specialize more in the leadership and then the career space for the coaching. And then I also do speaking as well, whether it's virtual or in person at different conferences. And then another piece outside of those two is also I work full time as an engineer. My background is in chemical engineering. I went to Iowa State University and I work as a senior process engineer for Mars Incorporated right now.
That is super great. I love to hear just when people expand out in terms of like service, in terms of their leadership, because that's, I guess, a leadership style that resonates with me in terms of like reaching back to other people. And I feel like it connects with a lot of people more. But I'm curious on what got you to that path in terms of creating NALA and then also the IncrediPaul podcast. So I'm interested in how you got there.
Okay. So without taking the rest of this podcast, I will short it down to say a lot of stuff with Knowledge STEM started really from when I was an undergrad. So Knowledge STEM houses that foundation in LSAMP. And so there's so many acronyms I'm throwing out, so I should probably define some of them. So NALA is the National Alliance Lead Acceleration of STEM. STEM means science, technology, engineering, and math. And then LSAMP or LSAMP, Louis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation. So LSAMP is a grant for the National Science Foundation. There are over 50 alliances around the country. And so it's a grant. So different organizations apply for it, and they have different ones that specialize in specific things. It's associated with about 10 different universities. So my intro into this was at my local LSAMP, Inspire, which is a whole nother acronym that's way too long. Just keep it as Inspire. And so it was led by Iowa State University. I got involved in their LSAMP right after my sophomore year of college. And then I found out they could actually fund research opportunities. And so I had already been doing undergraduate research during the semester with And that's a whole nother story how I even got involved with that. Maybe I'll get into it. And then they gave me an opportunity to work full time, to work in the same lab I was at. And then from there, I was able to do more stuff that they were wanting to start a student organization dedicated to research. So I was one of the founding members. It was called iResearch, kind of like the letter I for like iPod, iPhone, all those things. We were playing on that back in 2014. We're like, we're going to start this. So I got involved with that. I was a treasurer first for a year. And then the next year, I led the organization as a president for about a year and a half before I graduated. And so I was really involved, and that really started my leadership journey and a lot of stuff in Inspire and LSAMP. After I graduated, I stayed connected as an alumni, helped to form an alumni association for the Inspire LSAMP back in 2017. And in 2020, actually the end of 2019, reached out to some other LSAMPs, try to see what are other alumni associations that exist. Found out there was none that existed. We're able to present the idea that we had, and they said like, well, we love your idea. Would you consider leading this like for all the different LSAPs as a alumni association? And I was like, I don't know about that, but I will think about it. I prayed on it, and then was able to find a couple other people who are part of Inspire. So co-founders, Lizette Tamayo and Natalie Fuentes. And so they helped build the foundation. Plan was to go to different LSAPs. And I'm laughing because this was beginning of 2020. We're going to go to different LSAPs, different conferences. We went to one in February, Illinois LSAMP. Everyone knows what happened in March 2020. The world shut down. Well, I guess it has shut down overseas first, but the United States has shut down in March 2020. And so got to retool, build a foundation. At that point, we're called LSAMP Alumni Group. And we went through a few different changes, name changes. At some point, we were a National Association of LSAMP Alumni because we were focused on just LSAMP. And then probably almost 2 years ago, we transitioned to being now a STEM, brought it outside of only LSAMP because we realized a lot of people are interested in this community and what we're doing to help unite, support, and build community. And so that was why we changed the name. And then the podcast started in the middle of all of this. I started IncrediPaul and Nala the same year in 2020. I actually started IncrediPaul first. Yeah, April 2020. And then officially launched Nala October 2020 after we were trying to do all this stuff earlier that year. And then the podcast started in January of 2022 is when I put out the first episode. So now it's been almost 3 years of the podcast.
That's really cool. It is interesting that all this happened like right when the pandemic started.
Yeah.
Yes. I wonder, is it almost like, I feel like there was a bit of restlessness, at least during that time. And people were like, either it was making them or breaking them. I feel like you're a case where it was making you.
Yeah.
So I'm like, that's great that you were able to, at least within that time, it was a sucky time, admittedly. So it was like, you're like, well,
for sure.
You had a vision for at least what you wanted to be able to do, at least for other students in your position, or at least your peers and stuff like that. So it's like, it helps that you're able to transform that into being like, all right, enough with the pandemic. I know I'm at least going to try to do this, bring people together, even if it's virtually, or at least before it was that one conference and then it was virtual. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Because I know starting an organization during that time, what were kind of the challenges of somehow bringing people together, but also you still couldn't bring people together? So like, how were you able to adapt during that time?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'd say I had no choice but to adapt. It was in the middle of COVID, so really bringing people together was not an option. So when everything shut down in March, we tried to figure out, okay, what can we do? Because even between me and my co-founders, we were not located in the same city. And even a lot of stuff we had done prior to this with Inspire Alumni was really the foundation. We were already operating in kind of like a virtual environment because I think at the time, I'm trying to think, when I first started, Inspire LSAMP Alumni Committee with another co-founder. I was actually in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and she was in, I think she was in DC, either DC. Yeah, I think she was in DC at the time. So like 2 hours apart, like across the country. And then from there, like fast forward to when we're starting now STEM. Now I'm in St. Louis. I have another founder who's in DC, another one that's in Chicago. So we're still not in the same place. And actually throughout the time when we started, we did not see each other in person for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
2 years. We knew each other before, because one of them, we went to school together at Iowa State University. Another one was a part of the same LSAMP as I am. So I met her at different conferences. But through COVID and just life and work and families, all that stuff, like we connected together virtually. So a lot of Zoom meetings, a lot of it was just being really intentional to have regular meetings. Because what I learned early on is that if you just wait for an opportunity to meet, like, oh, these one-off things, it's like, it's not going to happen, or it's going to take a lot longer. You have to be really intentional with, okay, do we want to meet on a weekly basis, a monthly basis? I think we started out like every other week at first, and then we kind of scaled it back to monthly. And we were trying to take the foundations of what we had with the Inspire LSAMP for Knowledge STEM. And at first, we weren't sure if we were just going to just merge the two. At first, it wasn't going to be separate. It was just going to be one thing and just do it all for Knowledge STEM or LSAMP alumni group at the time. But then we realized we didn't want to lose like the personal like the personal touch of what we had already built with Inspire. And so I basically spun off. So I was like the president or co-president at the time, the co-president and co-founder for Inspire. I was like, are you comfortable taking the lead on this? I want to start to build this. We can keep it separate, continue to collaborate, and then try and figure out what we're going to do. One of the key things we talked about was mentorship. So we wanted to do some sort of things with mentorship. Also want to figure out, are people actually interested in this or not?
Yeah.
Because we knew like our local LSAB was, others we weren't sure about. So we were reaching out to a lot of different LSAM directors, a lot of social media stalking, to be honest.
Fair.
Yeah, social media stalking, as well as we're able to find a list of a lot of different emails for LSAM directors. So we're able to create like a generic welcome email that kind of talks about what we want to do, what we're about, and send it out. And because we didn't have access to any of these students, they didn't know who we were. So basically, we're just hoping that these directors will see our emails, read our emails, even though they had no idea who we are, and then forward it to their students and then have them join. And that's how we're doing it. And then trying to find people on mainly LinkedIn, because people have that information if they're in LSAMPs or different things. And that's how we were doing it really for the first several months.
Wow. It's interesting how, like, the cold email, I feel like, is everybody's fear, because you're like, I don't even know where to begin. And you're like, are they even going to read it? And it's actually surprising the number of people who actually do respond to it. Did you have a lot of success with people actually responding to it?
I would say a lot of people did not respond.
No,
but also a lot of people, because it's hard to tell like who actually sent the emails, because we sent it to these directors or campus coordinators. And then we would get some people responding. We saw a huge influx, or not huge, a big influx of people from the Puerto Rico LSAP. So one of my co-founders, Natalie Fuentes, I think it helps that she's Puerto Rican. She wasn't a part of the Puerto Rico LSAP, but she had connections there. And I think she connected with them. I think I'm not going to make that up. She spoke Spanish in it. So I think that's connects better because it's the language that they speak more of. Yeah. But she was in charge of recruiting that space. And we kind of broke it up. Different LSAPs we're going to reach out to. At least the ones we knew of at the time. I think it was about 30 different ones. And since then, like now there's over 50, I think like 54, 55. And there's new like every year because of how the grant process works. So Yeah.
That's super cool. It's interesting that University of Puerto Rico was one of the more responsive ones because
Yeah.
I've met a lot of people from various branches of the University of Puerto Rico because I know they have different like satellite campuses. They're really like they have huge populations and like the like I remember at the Leadership Alliance National Symposium, there was a lot of people there, and then at Abraham's there was a lot of people. I'm like, man, they come in deep, and I'm like, I know so many people there, and I'm like, this is
Yeah.
super cool. But um, but I want to go back a little bit because I know earlier you were mentioning your research opportunities at Iowa, and I know you said there was a story behind there, and like, and I'm curious what that entails.
Like
With
how I got into research.
yeah, because you said you
Yeah.
weren't initially interested in research, but you kind of transitioned into that after, I guess, being an undergrad and talking to people more. So I wanted to hear more about like
Yeah.
the switching of the mind.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. So I don't know if I mentioned that, like even coming into undergrad, applying to different schools, that I was dead set on going to medical school, and I was like medical school, so biology or chemistry major. And I think I just chose chemistry. I like chemistry better. As I was going through different college visits, like had a conversation with my dad at one of them, and he was saying, like, if for whatever reason medical school doesn't work out or you're not interested in it, are you okay being a chemistry major, being a chemist? And I thought about it. I was like no offense to chemists, but that wasn't for me. I was
Oh,
like, it's med school or bust, basically. So he kind of so I was thinking about it more. And it's like, well, if for whatever reason it doesn't work out, what is something you want to do? Are you wondering what's next? Has everything you tried failed? Or maybe you just feel stuck? Then coaching might be right for you. The coaching relationship is a relationship totally centered on you. If you're tired of running on the hamster wheel of life and want to start to see results, reach out to IncrediPaul for help. So what are you waiting for? Go to incredipaul.org/coaching, IncrediPaul.org/coaching, or at I am IncrediPaul on all my socials. Or you can click the link in the bio for your free coaching session. I want to make sure you become the most incredible version of yourself. I was like, well, I've always liked math and science. And so I think combining the two, that kind of lends towards engineering, which he's actually an engineer. And so I think for whatever reason, I didn't want to do what he was doing. I wanted to do my own thing and chart my own path. But when I thought about it, I was like, I actually do like this. Like I love math. I love science. So I was like, at that point, I think I wanted to do biomedical engineering because I was like still kind of focused in the med school side. And so that's what I was looking at different schools. I was actually dead set or going to the University of Missouri, Columbia, because I was from St. Louis and I had moved to Nebraska and I was trying to get back to closer. A lot of my friends were going to be going there. So Iowa State was actually the last school I applied to, like the very last school. I had no plans on going there. And then, so I had some scholarships at the University of Missouri. Also, Iowa State gave me some scholarships. But then Iowa State gave me a scholarship that covered all of tuition. And then even with that, I still wanted to go to the University of Missouri, even though what they gave me was just, I was just dead set. I was like, I still want to go there. I was going to have to pay, but it was going to be like in-state tuition with the scholarship, even though I was out of state. So I was like, it wasn't going to be too much. Yeah, but I would say it was like, we're going to give you a full tuition scholarship. Still wasn't sure. What was the tipping point was there was a summer program, SPEED, all these acronyms, summer program for enhancing engineering development. And so it was an 8-week program. And there's friends that I still have from this program I did summer of 2016, like a phenomenal program. So you already could tell I went to Iowa State, but this program get an opportunity to get paid 8 weeks to do research in a real research lab at Iowa State University. And so that lab that I got paired with, it was actually a collaboration with a chemical engineering lab and a medical lab,
Oh.
and they were doing research to regenerate nerve cells. So they had a grant from the U.S. Army. I got to do chemical engineering side with creating conduits and polymers. Also do the biology side with actually cell microscopy and different ELISAs and all that stuff that a lot of engineers don't get to do. I got to do that as well. And so that lab I did the summer before my freshman year. I ended up staying in that lab throughout my time at Iowa State. Yeah.
That is cool. Was it just the specific research that was keeping you, or was it the lab environment? Because I know there's different reasons why people stay, or at least in undergrad, stay in a lab.
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of both. I really enjoyed the research, and like research is a long process, as you know. A lot of people listening know as well. So it was like one of the first things I got into was we were working on the trans differentiation of mesenchymal stem cells. So basically taking these stem cells that are derived from the bone marrow and changing them into neuron-like stem cells. And so the reason I was doing that is that these were adult stem cells that are less invasive to get, trying to see if we can change them into like a neuron-like stem cell. That was like the first step that I was into. And then I got to do more stuff with actually figuring out what kind of polymers we're going to use, what kind of biodegradable polymers. The summer that I was actually at Iowa State, I had my own kind of part of the project that was really cool. So I just finished my sophomore year, and then I had a freshman student and then like a high school student, which I didn't even realize. At that point, I didn't know high school students could do research, but it was like my team, like as a rising junior, was looking at, so I got to learn some leadership, because I didn't know much about leadership at that point. To lead this team, we're looking at brain progenitor cells to see if this could be a viable cell type. And a lot of different figure plates were made and posters were made. And so I got to really like manage the high school student and the freshman student, working directly with the PI. And then there was also a grad student working with me. So I grew a lot that summer, because that was really the first summer I was on my own. I mean, during the school year on your own, but I feel like you have a lot more friends and stuff around you. The summers, there's not as many people there, and a bunch of my friends either went home or had different internships, went to other places. So I was like truly on my own. So my first time being on my own and having to cook for myself and couldn't rely on the dining hall as much. I ate so many Pop-Tarts that summer. It was like a running joke that I was eating way too many Pop-Tarts that till this day, I don't know if I've had a Pop-Tart since then.
You got it all out of your system.
I got it all out of my system.
Oh my God.
I don't know if that answers your question or not.
No, it does, because it's interesting, because you got started doing research earlier in at least in undergrad, because I know a lot of people sometimes discover it later in their undergrad careers, but because you got introduced to research, and then also kind of like having people under you while you're doing research, what made you, I guess, go down the industry route? Because it seems like it was almost preparing you to go down the traditional path of PhD and then PI, and because I'm like, you already had an undergrad or like a first year and a high school student, so
yeah, I'll say it was unofficial, but I was guiding them through it. But yeah, that's a good question. And really, for a while, I thought I was going to be that was the path I was moving to it, and really up until like the semester I graduated, I thought I was going to be going to grad school. But at the same time, I wanted to have other experiences as well. So I had that summer after my sophomore year, but I did a co-op. So I know it's more common in engineering, so maybe not everyone's familiar with it, but you take a semester off of school, you're still like classified as a full-time student, but you're working in industry. So the spring semester of my junior year, I took that off. So that was spring of 2015. And I was able to work for Cargill in like industrial type setting, like making like we had trucks of corn come in. It was processed into cornmeal and crude oil. And then we had a refinery next door that took that crude oil, made vegetable oils and FR3 that went into like substations. So huge, large industrial. I think we had over maybe up to like 200 trucks a day coming in with corn. So it was literally tons of corn getting pumped out every day. So it was a good experience, but I quickly realized it was not what I wanted. So I tell people that there's really no such thing as a bad internship experience or a co-op experience. You either learn that you really like it, or you learn that this is not for you. Like, I love the people. I loved what I learned, but I was like, it was like outdoors and all this stuff. I was like, and I was in Kansas, which Kansas is okay, but I was like, this is not, Wichita, Kansas, which I like the city, but it's like, I can't see myself living here long term. The company was good, but it's like, I thought about it more. I was like, it'd be cool to see kind of like the other side, because a lot of the stuff they were making were going to like other manufacturing companies. So I wanted to see like, what does it look like to be more in the true manufacturing, like consumer packaged goods space. And so a friend had actually, like, after I came back and I was there for the fall of my junior year, which is actually kind of like the second semester of my junior year, but because I took a semester off and kind of like shifted things, they had talked about experience they had at Nestle, and they really enjoyed the experience. And they said, I was like, how did you learn about that? Like, do they come to our career fair? And they're like, no, they don't. It's like, I just applied online. And they're like, wait, you applied online for an internship and you got it? And it's like, I can't even get the ones that I applied for in person. Like, what is going on? So I eventually applied for it. At that point, I had like this industry experience under my belt and a lot of other stuff I was doing with different student organizations. And so I got the interview, and their interview process was pretty intense for interns. Like, literally, they said over 1,000 people applied for the internship. I got to whittle it down to like 200 to 300. They flew all of us to Chicago for 2 days to like get to meet the different teams and do interviews in person.
Oh my God.
In Chicago, for an internship. And 200 to 300 that they brought in, but they're only taking 30 of us.
Oh,
and
wow.
They brought that many in. So I don't know how much they spent, but like, it was really like a filler into like their early career program. So was able to get in, go through the process. Pretty intense. Honestly, I've been into other interviews full time, and maybe it's just because I was newer to interviewing, but I feel like that interview process was pretty intense.
Wow.
Like, even now thinking back. So I was able to get in there, got the internship, worked in Jonesboro, Arkansas in a frozen food facility. So if we ever had Stouffer's or Lean Cuisine, like that's what they made there. So they made like the different frozen pizzas and lasagnas, pastas, all those things. Pretty large facility. I think like over 800 people on site were there. Massive. Got to do a lot of project engineering. And so through that process, I really liked being able to work on stuff that I was able to go to the store and look and be like, hey, I actually had a hand in making that. And so from there, was still doing research during the semester. I was like, okay, I feel like the perfect mix would try to combine the research and the industry part together. And so if we're talking with different people, I was like, okay, do I go into and get my PhD or master's first and then get into industry? Or do I go into industry and then come back? And then from talking to different people, what I realized is that a lot of the times with industry, it's easier to get into those positions if you're already in the company, as opposed to like you get your master's or PhD. Sometimes it's just all it comes down to is connections. And a lot of times the companies actually pay for you to get your master's or PhD, like through a reimbursement. So that was my plan that I was going to do, but it took a while. Like right now I am actually working in research for Mars, but that took longer than I expected. So like eight years later, I'm here. Almost 8 years later. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting how it at least turns out. And it's funny because I have other friends who are not even in STEM, but they're trying to figure out their own career path. And they are like one of my friends, he got his degree in it was communications, and he was trying to, even though he's interested in music, but he was trying to make something work, and now he has a job at a radio, not radio station. He has a job at a news station, and he's like, "I'm not even doing music." And I was like, "But you have to start. Like you can make it happen once you just start somewhere, because you'll meet people, and they know people who do other things that may be what you want to do." And so I'm like, just start somewhere, and because it's interesting how you said connections kind of got you to where you wanted to be, and I've talked to some other people about like how they get the jobs that they do, and some people didn't even apply. They literally just
Yeah.
did a presentation somewhere, and then somebody was like, "Oh yeah, we should talk," and then they just ended up getting a job, and I was like, I didn't even know that was possible. So it's like I love the point of you talking about how the connections were able to get you where you wanted to be, and it wasn't straightforward, but it ended up
Yeah.
like working out in the end.
Absolutely.
In terms of, I guess, the connections you made while you were at Nestle, how did it, I guess, eventually get you to the place that you're now doing the research, but in industry that you wanted to do?
That's a good question. I would say not necessarily directly at Nestle, kind of the path along the way.
Mm-hmm.
So at Nestle, when I was an intern, that really helped me figure out that consumer packaged goods is something I want to work in. I like the fast pacedness of it and how everything is different every day. I think the connection was kind of like built slowly, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So after trying to think of where's the best place to start, because it's not really like a seamless transition. It was something that I always had at the back of my mind, and I was trying to my way to get there, and then hit some roadblocks along the way, and then was able to finally have this opportunity with Mars. But trying to condense it, like I originally out of college, I worked for Conagra Brands, which is another food company. So if you've ever had like the Slim Jims or Orville Redenbacher popcorn, Peter Pan peanut butter, Banquet pot pies, Healthy Choice, that's all the stuff that they made. Was not there for very long. I was there for 3 months. Yeah, I was like actually less than 3 months, because I actually wanted to work for General Mills, but they hadn't gotten back to me until after I started working at Conagra. So there's nothing wrong with Conagra. It's just like that wasn't where I actually wanted to work.
Yeah.
But like they had given me a job offer, and I'm like, a job is better than no job. So I took it.
Fair.
Yeah. But ended up at General Mills in the kind of their early career program. So I got to learn a lot of different stuff in manufacturing, different aspects of it. And then from there, I made it kind of clear that what I want to do is in R&D, research and development. And I guess what I found out later on is that they actually had a specific like R&D program that I could have got into that I didn't know about. As I was like, oh, you should have applied for this. I was like, I didn't know about that. Like, I thought, I was like, well, if I'm going to be doing research and manufacturing, I feel like I should kind of know the manufacturing process, so it helps with my research to know like what's feasible. And so despite that, I still was able to make connections in R&D. I was in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Headquarters was in Minneapolis. Was able to make connections with some people for different opportunities. It didn't end up panning out, and there's some stuff I was trying to do. I would say leadership, I think that's why I'm so passionate about it, is very critical. I had a leader that wasn't necessarily trying to help with my next step. I was trying to stick to what she thought the program was supposed to do, which from talking with other people in the program, learned that you can pretty much make the program whatever you want. But she was trying to stick to one script. So because of that, I was like, I don't know if I'm actually going to be able to get where I want to go with this leader. So I looked for other opportunities, and really I didn't want to leave General Mills. It was just like the leader I had, and it was just a perfect opportunity with Nestle Purina in St. Louis, because I was from St. Louis. I knew about Nestle Purina, and it was also a job I would get to travel a lot. And that was something I wanted to do to kind of experience that. So I had that job. It had nothing to do with research. It was all about continuous improvement, which I now learn continuous improvement is really like the foundation of pretty much everything because you're constantly trying to improve. So that job really helped a lot of different things. From there, I transitioned into like a technical role on the packaging side of things, trying to get closer to research. So I worked with the research group in that role, even though I don't have any background in packaging or mechanical engineering, but a lot of it's just problem solving. From there, I transferred into process engineering. I know this is a really long-winded answer already, but it just took, it was a long process.
Yeah.
And then for the process engineering was more closer to what I studied in chemical engineering, and then still working on some pretty cool projects, like actually designing and building 2 new factories at the same time. I actually traveled internationally a couple of times with the company. Like the first time I went to Italy, the second time I went to Italy, France, and the Netherlands for like a couple of weeks. Yeah. So a lot of experience. But then with that, I kind of like life happened, got married. I was traveling way too much. And then I was like, I need to cut back on it. There was an opportunity that I could do that with Purina. So I transitioned to another company with Henkel as a continuous improvement manager. Again, not really something I wanted to do. I had the experience there and it was a promotion. So I was like, I'll do this, get into the company, see if I can get into research with this company. That didn't end up panning out. Had some interesting experiences there, to say the least. Was there only a year. I'll just keep it at that. I don't like to bash companies, but there's interesting experiences. Was able to find an opportunity with Mars that was in research, and a lot of the stuff I had done in continuous improvement on the leadership side, as well as on the process side, kind of came together because they were looking for someone who had kind of like a more senior role, had like manufacturing experience, but also had like the research lens as well, and had worked on capital projects. And so that worked out fairly well. Towards the end of last year, I accepted that position, and then started in February of this year. So it's a fairly new, but working on some of the brands that if you have a pet, so Mars makes a lot of different brands in the pet food. So just to lift up a few, like Pedigree, Caesar, Temptation, Sheba, all those things. So I get to work on some of the brands that a lot of people really know and love. So
yeah, I have 2 cats, so I'm familiar with the brands pretty well. Yeah. But I love your point about the continuous improvement, because that was, I guess, the overall theme of where you were going with each new position, because it was like, okay, this may not be exactly what I want it to be, but it's getting me closer to where I'm trying to be. So I think that's a great point for people to take home in terms of like them not like, especially in your early career, because sometimes you're just somewhere and it's not where you want to be, but you're like, I'm here, I'm learning something. And as long as you're learning something, that's the point. So I feel like that's like one of the bigger things, especially for us coming out of, whether we're coming fresh out of school or whether we're getting into our first job or whatever we're doing, it's like, that is the thing to keep in mind, because it's not just career, but life in general is the marathon, not the whole finishing of the race. So it's definitely like an important thing to remember. But I know we're running out of time, but I did want to thank you for sharing your whole journey and your path, because that's what this is all about. And I think it was great hearing about how it wasn't as straightforward for you in terms of like, oh, I'm going to be a medical doctor. And then you got into research and engineering, which was not completely different, but it definitely was different. A shift. It definitely was a shift. So I really loved hearing about that. And I didn't know there was so many like career changes, even because I know you're more established now, but I still consider you're still like at the beginning of your career. So it's like, oh, you still made all these switches, and you're like, okay, now I'm here. But it was like nice to know that even when you it is like, oh, I am not established, but I'm positioned. That doesn't have to be it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's important to take away. And also like the takeaways of learning the leadership styles from when you were working, be like, this is not for me. And it's okay that it's not for you. And that's where you can adjust and learn from that. So I want to thank you for joining us on this journey today. I want to share with the listeners where to find you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I'm super excited for this podcast and how they can find me. I'm pretty much on all social media. Spend too much time on there, trying to spend less. But it is the letter I, the letter M, IncrediPaul. I am IncrediPaul on either TikTok, on Instagram. I have an X, or I still call it Twitter. I'm not really on there as much. You can find me more on Threads. And then on LinkedIn, actually, you can search Paul Ferranbi. What'll come up is actually Ibuku Olua. So they can spell it IBUKUNOLUWA, Ibuku Olua. So that's my birth name. It's not my first name. That's a whole nother story because it was my birthday. But Ibuku Olua, Ferranbi, IncrediPaul. You search any of those things, you'll be able to find me.
Thank you so much. And I hope you join us next time on our scientific journey. Bye-bye.
Be sure to rate and review this podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform. We'll see you here next time. And be incredible.